This is from Officer King's body cam. And this is George Floyd on the sidewalk. And I believe prosecutors here will argue that he's complying, that he is not resisting. He is sitting on the sidewalk. Do you think, Neama, this could be a persuasive argument regarding the demeanor and actions of George Floyd to contrast it with the actions taken by the officers?
Yes, Vinny, this is a very powerful video. This is someone who's not only compliant, this is someone who's not suffering from heart disease. This is not someone who's overdosing on fentanyl or methamphetamine or any other drug. So this is a great video for the prosecution, and it shows that had they handled things according to their own manual and released that pressure after he was in cuffs, George Floyd would still be alive today.
All right, I want to show you one more piece from Officer King's body cam. And this part is while they have restrained George Floyd on the ground. And it's at this point where they are checking for a pulse. And Officer King says, "I couldn't find one. I couldn't find one." So what's the argument here, Neama? What does this prove? What element of what crime does this help prove when you've got King checking for the pulse and they don't find it and they keep him restrained for several minutes beyond this moment?
This is how you get to that felony assault. This is that unlawful touching that's going to cause bodily harm. This is the key evidence for the second-degree murder charge, that felony murder charge, because you know the defense is going to point to that picture in the manual that shows this restraint, and the prosecution is going to point to the text to the left of it that says that you are to release the pressure when the individual is in cuffs. And not only did they not do that in this case, they kept the pressure on after George Floyd was already without a pulse. And likely to the manslaughter, obviously, that's that culpable negligence or gross negligence, which is slightly more than a civil standard. But every other charge, Chauvin is on notice that he is killing this man. So it's incredibly important because it goes to prove his intent.
All right, we're going to continue going through the evidence and the arguments that prosecutors are going to have to make to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Released here. Manner of death, homicide. How important is that? Just getting up there and telling this jury, you know, the doctor, the medical examiner, saying this, ladies and gentlemen, was a homicide.
It's critically important. We're going to see a battle of the experts here. And I, too, love Dr. Politan, maybe because his wife is a former prosecutor, but he's fantastic in these types of cases. But I think Baker will be good enough to get the prosecution what they need. Obviously, it's not that magic language that you like to have in these types of med-legal cases, as we call it. But, you know, I think it's good enough. I think the manner of death being a homicide, the asphyxiation, I think it's enough to get past the two defense arguments that we know are going to be there, the heart disease and death by drug overdose.
Will the evidence of these prior incidents be in proving the case against Derek Chauvin?
Very powerful. Prosecutors, we love these prior bad acts evidence. And, you know, I originally thought Cahill wasn't going to let any of this in, right? That was his, at least the direction he was heading in. And I think when he let part of the 2019 Floyd arrest come in to go to the medical issues, and then he kind of took a step back and said, okay, if I'm going to let part of the previous Floyd arrest come in, then it's only fair to let some of this prior bad acts evidence. I think it's very powerful, helps dirty up Chauvin, and to show at least the first incidents and the second that, hey, he knew what he was doing and he chose not to in this case. This was deliberate and to help prove that intent.
Teresa Jean-Pierre Coy, where's your level of confidence that prosecutors can prove that second-degree murder, 0 to 10?
I'm going to give you an 8, and I'm going to just give one word, the video.
Neama?
I think he's guilty of second degree, but it's a 6. It's so incredibly hard to convince law enforcement in this country, especially of second degree murder. I agree. The jury's going to end up on third degree, and the manslaughter is just a gimme.
All right, we shall.
And Vinny,
Go ahead.
You notice if you average Teresa and Neema scores, you come out with a 7.
You come out with a 7, which is where
I agree with Teresa on this one, Vinny. I mean, it's really a travesty of justice that she hasn't been charged here. I mean, she is the mastermind. She was an accomplice. She was a co-conspirator. She's an accessory after the fact. She is a murderer. She should be charged. And let's not forget, the whole reason we're here is she was upset because her parents put her and paid for an Airbnb because they were concerned about their health, because she wasn't practicing social distancing. She was going out and she was being reckless at the beginning of the pandemic. That's the whole reason these two were killed, execution style, shot in the back of the head.
Vinny, the only reason why I think that prosecutors may not have charged her yet, and I think the charges could come at some point, is perhaps they think that at the trial, by not charging her, it takes away the defense argument when she's the star witness. When the defense will say, "What are you getting out of it? You are being charged," and they cut you a deal, and now you can walk.
It became a big story, I believe, because many people were at home watching TV or social media due to the pandemic. Neama, how much do you think the pandemic played into how widespread this story became so quickly?
It certainly played a role as the beginning of the pandemic, beginning of quarantine. Everyone's shut down. Everyone's watching the video. But I think it had to do with more than that. And similar to what Dave and Teresa said, is this wasn't just, a shooting or someone that law enforcement can argue was a threat or was violent. This was an execution. Let's not forget, this wasn't just a murder. And this was an execution that took place over 8 minutes and 46 seconds while a grown man was crying, asking for his mother. Multiple bystanders, civilians, were asking this officer essentially just to not kill him. And we all saw this live. That's why this case is so just, and we deal with sad cases as attorneys and prosecutors and defense attorneys every single day. But this one just hurts in a different way. And just truly, I'm heartbroken for George and his family.